This story is titled My Parents Kicked Me Out at 18 for Character Building. Now they want my money and I told them no. Hey Reddit, I'm 25 male and I'm dealing with something that's been eating at me for weeks. My parents keep asking me for money and I keep saying no, but everyone in my family is telling me I'm being selfish and cruel, so I need to know if I'm actually the asshole here. Let me give you some background. I grew up in a pretty average middle-class household. My dad worked in sales, my mom was a part-time receptionist at a dental office. We weren't rich, but we weren't struggling either. We had a nice house in the suburbs, I had my own room, we went on vacation once a year, normal stuff. My parents were always big on this whole self-reliance independence thing, which I get to an extent, but they took it to an extreme level. Growing up, they were always talking about how kids these days are too soft, too dependent on their parents, how back in their day people figured things out on their own. My dad would always tell these stories about how he worked 3 jobs to put himself through college, which I later found out was a massive exaggeration. He worked one part-time job at a grocery store and his parents paid most of his tuition, but whatever. When I turned 16, they sat me down and told me that when I turned 18 I'd need to move out. They said it was for my own good, that I needed to learn to stand on my own 2 feet, that staying at home would make me weak and dependent. I remember thinking they were joking at first, like what parents actually kick their kid out the day they turn 18, but they were dead serious. They gave me 2 years notice, which I guess they thought was generous. They told me I should start working, saving money, preparing for the real world, so I did. I got a job at a fast food place working nights and weekends while finishing high school. I saved every penny I could. I didn't go to prom, didn't hang out with friends much, didn't do any of the normal teenage stuff because I was too busy preparing to be homeless at 18. My friends thought my parents were insane. My girlfriend at the time told me that was abusive. Her parents said I could stay with them if I needed to, but I was too proud to accept. I kept thinking maybe my parents would change their minds. Maybe when it actually came time for me to leave they'd realize how crazy this was. Spoiler alert, they didn't. The day after my 18th birthday, literally the day after, my dad woke me up at 7 a.m. and told me I had until noon to pack my stuff and leave. I thought he was joking at first, but then my mom came in with trash bags, yes, trash bags, not even boxes, and started pulling clothes out of my dresser. I had about $3,000 saved up from 2 years of working. I packed everything I owned into my beat-up Honda Civic that I'd bought with my own money and left. I didn't even know where to go at first. I just drove around for a while trying not to cry. I was 18 years old and my parents had just thrown me out like garbage. I ended up renting a room in this sketchy house with 5 other people. It was in a bad part of town, the kind of place where you hear gunshots at night and don't even flinch after a while. My room was tiny, barely big enough for a twin mattress on the floor and a small dresser. I shared a bathroom with 4 other guys. The kitchen was disgusting, I'm talking mold in the fridge, mystery stains everywhere, but it was all I could afford. I was paying $400 a month for that room plus utilities, which doesn't sound like much, but when you're making minimum wage at a fast food joint, it's basically everything. I'd work 8-hour shifts, come home exhausted to that depressing room and just crash. I lived off ramen noodles, dollar menu items, whatever I could get cheap. I lost like 20 pounds in the first 3 months just from not being able to afford food. My parents didn't check on me once, not a single phone call, text, nothing. It was like I'd ceased to exist the moment I walked out their door. Meanwhile, they'd converted my bedroom into a home gym. I found out later from my aunt that my mom was telling people how proud she was that they'd raised such an independent son, how I was out there making it on my own, like they'd done me some huge favor. That first year was hell. I was lonely, broke, scared. I'd wake up in the middle of the night having panic attacks about money, about whether I'd be able to make rent. I remember one time I got sick with the flu but couldn't afford to miss work because I needed every single shift, so I went in anyway and ended up passing out in the kitchen. They sent me home and docked my pay. I cried the whole drive back to that awful house. I tried going to community college, but I couldn't afford it, even with financial aid. I'd have to take out loans and I was terrified of debt, so I just kept working. I picked up a second job doing overnight stocking at a grocery store. I was working like 70 hours a week between both jobs, barely sleeping, living in that horrible room, eating garbage food, but I was surviving barely. Around 19, I started looking for better opportunities. I taught myself coding through free online resources. I'd spend my few free hours watching YouTube tutorials, reading documentation, practicing. I didn't have a computer at first, so I'd go to the library and use theirs for the maximum 2 hours they allowed. Then I saved up and bought a cheap used laptop off Craigslist. By 20, I'd built up enough of a portfolio to apply for junior developer positions. I must have sent out 200 applications, got rejected from most of them, but finally one small startup took a chance on me. It didn't pay great, $45K a year, but it was so much more than I was making at my 2 retail jobs. I cried when I got the offer. I kept living like I was broke though. That's the thing about being poor for those first couple years, it changes you. Even when I started making more money, I couldn't bring myself to spend it. I stayed in that crappy room, I kept eating cheap food, I didn't buy anything I didn't absolutely need. Every dollar I didn't spend on survival went straight into savings. By 22, I'd moved up to a mid-level developer position making 75K. I finally moved out of that horrible house into a small studio apartment, nothing fancy, but it was mine. It was clean, safe, quiet. I still kept my expenses low though. I furnished the whole place with stuff from Facebook Marketplace and thrift stores. I meal prepped everything, I cut my own hair, I drove my same old beat-up Civic. People at work would invite me out for happy hour or lunch, and I'd always decline because I couldn't justify spending $15 on a burger when I could make food at home for $2. They probably thought I was antisocial, but I was just traumatized about money. Every dollar I spent felt like a betrayal of those first couple years of struggle. By 24, I'd saved over 100K between my savings and investments. I was still living in that same studio apartment, still driving the same car, still living off meal prep and cheap groceries. People who knew what I made thought I was insane for living like that, but I felt safe having that money cushion. I never wanted to be that scared, broke 18-year-old again. Then I got promoted to senior developer making 120K a year. I finally let myself upgrade a little. I moved into a nicer one-bedroom apartment. I bought some actual furniture from real stores, not just used stuff. I even started going out to eat occasionally, though I still felt guilty every time. During all of this, my parents and I had minimal contact. They'd reached out a few times over the years, usually around holidays. My mom would send generic texts like "hope you're doing well" or "happy birthday," never anything substantial, never asking how I was really doing, if I needed anything, just performative check-ins so they could tell themselves they were still in my life. I'd respond politely but briefly. I wasn't interested in a relationship with people who'd thrown me out and never looked back. I didn't tell them about my struggles that first couple years, didn't tell them about the panic attacks, the hunger, the fear. I figured they didn't care, and honestly I didn't want their pity. Last year around Thanksgiving my mom called me, actual phone call, which was rare. She said they wanted to see me, that it had been too long, that family was important. I was hesitant, but I agreed to meet them for coffee. I don't know what I was expecting, maybe an apology, maybe some acknowledgement of what they'd put me through. Instead, they spent the whole time talking about themselves. My dad's sales numbers were down, my mom had cut back her hours at the dental office, they'd refinanced their house, they were planning a trip to Europe. They asked me a few surface-level questions about my life but didn't really listen to the answers. It was like meeting acquaintances, not parents. I left that coffee feeling empty, like I'd hoped for something I was never going to get. But whatever, I'd built a life without them. I didn't need their validation. I had a good job, a nice apartment, money in the bank. I was doing fine. Then 2 months ago, everything changed. My dad called me, which was even more rare than my mom calling. He said they needed to talk about something important. Could they come over to my place? I said sure, figuring maybe someone was sick. Maybe this was the conversation where they finally acknowledged the past. They came over and I could tell something was off right away. They kept looking around my apartment, making comments about how nice it was, how I'd done well for myself. My dad asked what I was paying in rent, and when I told him, he whistled, said that was quite a chunk of change. Then they got to the point. They were having financial trouble. My dad's company had downsized and he'd lost his job. My mom's hours had been cut even more. They'd been living beyond their means for years apparently, and now they were struggling. They'd refinanced their house multiple times and now they were underwater on the mortgage. They had credit card debt, car payments, all these expenses and not enough income. And then came the ask. They needed money. They didn't say how much at first, just that they needed help from family, and I was family, wasn't I? I just stared at them, trying to process what was happening. These people who'd kicked me out at 18, who'd left me to struggle and suffer alone, were now asking me for money. How much, I asked. My dad cleared his throat. At least $2,000 a month, just until he found a new job, maybe 6 months or so. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The absurdity of it was too much. They looked offended, like I was being rude. You're joking, I said. They weren't joking. My mom started talking about how hard things were, how they might lose the house, how they didn't know what else to do. I was their son, didn't I want to help them? I took a deep breath and said no, just like that. No explanation, no justification, just no. My dad's face turned red. He started going off about how ungrateful I was, how they'd raised me, given me everything, and now I wouldn't help them in their time of need. I almost lost it right there. You kicked me out at 18, I said, my voice shaking. You threw me out with nothing and didn't contact me once to see if I was okay, if I was surviving. I was homeless, broke, terrified, and you didn't care. But now you need money and suddenly I'm family. My mom started crying, saying that kicking me out was for my own good, that it made me strong, that I should be thanking them. I told them to leave. They tried arguing, but I just kept saying no, get out, leave. Eventually they did, but not before my dad said I'd regret this, that family takes care of family. The next day I started getting calls from extended family. My aunt, my uncle, my grandparents, all of them saying I needed to help my parents, that they were in real trouble, that I had the money and should share it. Apparently my parents had been calling everyone, telling their sob story and painting me as the villain. I tried explaining my side, but no one wanted to hear it. They all said that was in the past, that I needed to let it go, be the bigger person. My grandmother actually said I was being cruel and selfish, that she raised my dad better than this. The irony, my parents have called me dozens of times, left voicemails, sent texts, all asking for money. Sometimes they're nice and pleading, sometimes they're angry and accusatory. They've showed up at my apartment twice. I didn't let them in. Yesterday, my mom sent me a text saying they're going to lose the house, that it'll be my fault, that I'll have to live with knowing I could have helped and didn't. And I'll admit that got to me a little. Part of me feels guilty, like maybe I should help. But another part of me is still that terrified 18-year-old sleeping on a mattress on the floor in a dangerous neighborhood wondering if he'd make rent. My coworker who I finally told about all this said I'm completely justified, that my parents made their choices and now they're facing consequences. But my family is making me feel like a monster. So Reddit, AITA for refusing to give my parents money after they kicked me out at 18. Edit, wow, this blew up. I'm reading all the comments and I appreciate everyone's perspective. A lot of you are asking questions, so let me clarify a few things. Yes, they literally kicked me out the day after my 18th birthday. It wasn't a suggestion or encouragement to be independent. They told me I had to leave and packed my stuff themselves. No, they never helped me financially after I left, not once. I didn't ask because I knew they'd say no. The whole point of kicking me out was that I was supposed to figure it out alone. Yes, I'm sure they're actually in financial trouble. My aunt confirmed it, though she also said they made a lot of dumb decisions like buying a new truck last year and going on expensive vacations. Someone asked if they apologized. No, they haven't. They still insist kicking me out was good parenting and that I should be grateful. A few people said I should help them anyway because they're family and then cut contact. Honestly, I've thought about it, but I don't think I can. I worked too hard for this money. It represents security, safety, everything I didn't have for years. I can't just give that away. Also, someone asked what my parents do now that they need $2,000 a month. Apparently their mortgage is $2,800, their truck payment is $600, they have credit card minimums around $500 plus utilities, food, etc. My dad's unemployment isn't covering it. My mom makes maybe $1,200 a month part-time. Thank you all for the support. It helps to know I'm not crazy for feeling conflicted about this. Edit 2, I'm getting a lot of messages telling me to block my parents and go no contact. I've been thinking about it seriously. The stress of their constant calls and texts is getting to me, but there's still this small part of me that hopes they'll understand why I'm saying no, that they'll finally see what they did to me was wrong. Probably not going to happen though, is it? Anyway, I'll update if anything major changes. Thanks again, Reddit.